understand just how hard making a video game is. You think to yourself, all I gotta do is slap some art, code, writing, music together, and it'll all work out, right? Well, that's what I thought until I founded my indie game studio, Soldering Studio. As a game designer, I thought I would be spending my days writing dialogue and coming up with cool mechanics. Instead, I'm looking at spreadsheets all day. First-time game developers don't realize just how important project management is. I'll be covering tips for effective project management and common pitfalls I've seen in other teams. You've thought of your million-dollar game idea. Maybe you even have a small prototype, and you're ready to dive into full production. Well, you've got some work ahead of you before you do so. I would highly recommend creating a week-by-week or month-by-month production schedule of your entire game span. But whatever end date you have on your timeline, you will probably take much longer than that. Many people say that games take twice as long as people initially estimate. Games are unique because of how different disciplines, art, music, writing, programming, come together to form a cohesive project. That's why game development is so special, but it's also why development takes so long. Polishing and bug fixing also take more time than expected. Getting the basic building blocks of your game can take just as long as refining your build. Before development, I would highly recommend creating a Google Drive organized by department and investing in some project management tools. Trello is really popular, but my team uses spreadsheets and Google Docs. Assuming you're working on a team, a Discord server is great to set up prior. I started my game development journey at a student club at UCLA, which of course had game projects. At the time, teams of 5 to 10 would use one Discord channel to communicate everything about their game. Yeah, that just doesn't cut it. I was the first one to create a whole server for my game, and now every team creates a whole server. Some channels I'd recommend including are announcements, general, thanks, to thank someone for something great they did, a fun channel such as memes or motivation, resources, inspiration, contact with everyone's GitHub, email, full name, socials, etc., and multiple voice channels. Games have a lot of moving parts. Character sprites, backgrounds, sound effects, music. It can be really hard keeping track of it all. That's why I'd recommend making a list of all the tasks needed for your game in one place, at least to the best of your ability. Of course, games are all about iteration, but you want to have somewhat of a game plan before production. It's actually time to make the damn game. Assuming that your first game is a hobby project, I would recommend assigning each person a task. I've seen teams list a ton of tasks and have everything be a free-for-all, but that doesn't work very well. I would also recommend assigning a concrete deadline. With no deadline, there's no pressure to finish, which means no game. When people get told finish this when you can, that means it goes to the very bottom of their to-do list. For my team, we will separate all of our tasks by department and then write them all down in a spreadsheet. Each task has a name associated with it and a deadline. How you assign tasks can also be a tricky ordeal. If there's anything lost in communication, that could mean that the wrong asset is submitted, which feels bad for everyone because now work is scrapped. Here is an actual task that my art director assigned our VFX artist. Firstly, note that it's a written task instead of one given verbally. She gave a description of a player trail VFX and when it shows up in our game. She gave references of player trails in other games to give an idea of our intended visual style. Finally, she assigned a check-in date and a due date. I would recommend encouraging your team to submit their work in progresses to ensure that all tasks are on the right track. Things will inevitably go wrong, which is why I would recommend keeping in mind what is actually necessary for your game, what would be nice to have, and then your dream stretch goals. And whatever you think is actually necessary to finish your game, take out even more. You want the absolute bare bones. You want to have a game design Bible that describes all aspects of your game, how each level feels, the art style, the story, etc. Soldering Studio has ours in a Figma. The Bible is super important in case new members onboard mid-development. It also just helps keeping your team on track. Because different disciplines need to work together, it's really good to have one document that unites all team members. With that in mind, at Soldering Studio, all disciplines present to each other. Artists can weigh in on the narrative can weigh in on the music, and so on. on. For example, I, as our game writer, presented to our level designer. That way, our level designer can design the levels to match the story's tone. Playtest as early as you possibly can. I would recommend doing it while you're developing the game and not at the very end. This is more so advice if your game is a hobby project, but I would really recommend having an optional work session after your meetings. That way people have a designated time in their schedule to work on the game and people can socialize. Socializing is good. And that wraps up my production tips. If you are interested in these more in-depth topics about game development, I would highly recommend checking out my Patreon. I offer one-on-one consulting, bonus videos, and game dev resources. As always, you can subscribe and check out my other socials. I will see you in the next one.